Hey, welcome back to the Bitcoin Reformation Podcast.
Good to be back with you.
Yeah, how you doing?
Doing well, doing real well. I'm sunny California, although there's snow on the ground up here at 7,000 feet. I just missed the launch of one of the SpaceX rockets last night. That if I had timed it well, I might have been able to see it. But it's good. I'm well. It's good to be with you. How about you, Jared? Out there in
Things
Pennsylvania.
going well. Rainy Pennsylvania, so my basement is leaking and water is everywhere, but you can't really do anything about it other than watch it and mop it up and pray it stops to rain.
And how about you, Ben, our host there in St. Louis?
Yeah, we're well. We had some tornadoes come through last night, but we were safe, and I don't think that they caused any damage. Just a lot of sirens going off, and lots of puddles in the yards. So we're doing fine. Everybody's off to school, and I'm enjoying my best sabbatical life.
Good for you. Well, we're here post-Easter in the Easter season, which the Christian Church and certainly the Lutheran Church celebrates for some time. And our topic for today is scarcity and abundance. That's a topic. I think our contention is going to be in the conversation we're going to try and have is to talk about that in relation to monetary systems, the U.S. dollar, as a for instance, and Bitcoin. And then I think also really have fun with this also theologically as Christian men, Lutheran pastors, talking about it in relation to our life now in Christ post-Easter, which is true for us, truly, post-Easter. But this was always the hope, the promise of God's people, even pre-Easter, that God was going to do something through a Messiah. And so he has. So anyways, maybe we'll do the first thing first. Dollars and Bitcoin. And I know I suggested the topic, but I'm gonna take a pause then because I've just been speaking and give it over to you guys.
I think one of the places you got to start with this is to differentiate, or at least to get that basic understanding, like why is it important to even consider this, right? So topics that you think about that are always scarce that we can touch on and get really easily. Things like our time, right? We don't know how long we have. We don't know that day when we're going to die, but we know that we have 24 hours every single day that we got to eat, sleep, go to the bathroom, do all the stuff we normally do. Things like the dollars in our bank account are scarce, right? I can't just go in there and ask the support people, please give me some more money, right? That's not how it works. There are scarce resources, right? There's only so much water that we could have, and all those sort of things. But then you think about what is truly abundant. There's a movie on Apple TV on Beanie Babies and the craze that happened with them. And so it became super popular. Suddenly they were worth lots and lots and lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of money. But then what do? They make more, right? And so they can as many times and as many people as they can employ and as many products that they can ship, they can just keep making more and more and more to meet that demand. And I mean, that's the same with all other things too. You think about in COVID, we had toilet paper shortages. Well, eventually they caught up. They made more toilet paper to fill that demand, all those sort of things. So there's a lot in life, I would say, that we're used to thinking about in terms of scarcity and abundance, but we just don't usually stop to think about it in that terms, that it's a part of our everyday life. We just don't realize it.
I think I had a Beanie Baby or two, but what I had as a kid was baseball cards, and I still have them. They're up in the attic, and if we ever move again, my wife is going to demand that I just throw them all away because they continue to be worth nothing. But I think the thing is that because they were created in a factory, and except for maybe one or two cards that were this real limited run, and they actually, like Don Russ said, well, we only created 500 of the Nolan Ryans. I mean, how do you verify that? They just stuck them in these random packs, right? But for all the rest of my cards, I have no idea how many Rickey Henderson rookie cards were ever created. And so if somebody goes out and they want to buy a Rickey Henderson rookie card, I don't understand really how the price uh, goes relative to how many of those are actually out there. And because we don't know, there's an interesting philosopher named Walter Benjamin who talked about the reproduction of art in a mechanical age. So the Mona Lisa is worth a whole bunch of money because there's only one of them. But in the mechanical age where you can just do millions of knockoffs, the whole question of surplus and supply and abundance and scarcity is kind of a real misnomer and kind of a mystery. But not every, and I think we've been conditioned to think that that's just the way it is with everything now, right? If you have a JPEG, you can send it. You take a picture with your phone, you can make a copy and you can send it to your mom and you can send it to your friend, and you can just keep making as many copies as you need. Isn't that kind of how everything in life is?
Yeah, I love both of those. And I'll maybe step back from the collectibles and just go to things that are produced or even unearthed. So on the production side, you're right. If something becomes simply more valuable, if Ford is suddenly selling through their Lightning F-150s, which they aren't, by the way, they would be glad to ramp up those production lines all the more and sell more of them. That they will work on that. They have their own logistics for certain and headaches also, but they're not going to make collectible F-150s for the most part. They just want to get volume, many of them out the door. Gold supply as well. I mean, the miners are there. Gold's at a great price right now, something like $2,200 an ounce. If it jumps to $3,000 an ounce, they will pick up more shifts at the gold mine. There are some gold mines that are mothballed right now that will come back online. So that I think heard that what you were saying, Jared, that if demand increases, not only will price possibly increase momentarily, but production most certainly is as well. And then you get into the whole collectibles where there's the claim that they're scarce, but how can you know that? How do you know that? I heard you asking that, Ben. And then, on the computer side, you said the mechanical art in the mechanical age. Well, how about artifacts in the digital age, where this is precisely what computers do? What they are masterful at is making copies of copies of copies and making them with relatively high fidelity most of the time. But they're copy machines. I can, with my phone, send a photo from me to the both of you or one of you. It's not as if that photo no longer exists on my phone, right? I can send and delete, but I mean, the cameras, the phones, the computers, they are copy machines.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that just has conditioned people to think that's just the way most, I mean, obviously human beings aren't that way, right? Although there's, the whole cloning, and Star Wars kind of took this down a whole rabbit trail of the clone troopers and infinite copies of even humans. But that's a whole topic for for another day. But in everyday life, even like stuff that I have, because we live in America and we're in such a throwaway society, if I break my microphone or my mouse or my phone or whatever, I can just go get another one, right? Bitcoin is not like that.
True. And we're going to go to the Bitcoin. If I can hit a pause there, though, we were talking about manufactured goods, right? So manufactured goods are on the one hand scarce, and yet the manufacturers more than happy to make them less scarce most often, right? To produce more, sell more, right? That's their job. And if I owned a bakery and was selling cookies, I'd want to do the same thing. I mean, I'm selling out every day, a third of the day through my work hours. I'm gonna bake more, maybe be in a position now to hire more people to do more. That's a happy place to be in. Who's for someone who's a manufacturer or a goods producer, right? Who's serving my neighbor through whatever vocation I have. If I can do more and it's good for me and it's good for my neighbor, I'm going to seek to do that. The other, though, abundance that's coming into all this is on the US dollar side. And I think for the three of us, I know for the three of us from our conversations that this is part of what Bitcoin did to us, is it acted as some sort of irritant. I don't know where the irritant is. We'll call it a pebble in the shoe, right? It was an irritant. Um, and instead of being like tolerant of irritants, sometimes you actually address those irritants, right? You start saying, what is this? And you start learning. And so for us, Bitcoin came along and says, hey, fixed supply, never to be changed. And you say to yourself, well, what is this? And how is that different from the status quo? And again, I'll pause myself because I could keep going on, but I'll pose that question to the two of you then. How is a fixed monetary supply different from the status quo?
I mean, I feel like we should do charts and graphs here, but you don't really need to look at an actual chart, right? So in the finance world, there's different charts that they use to try and track how many real dollars there are in the world, and there's all these different labels they have for them. But all you really need to know is imagine a chart with a line in the bottom left-hand corner and then a line in like the top right-hand corner. And that's what all of these charts look like, right? That the amount of dollars in the world have gone up, right? That the available supply does not seem to be scarce at all, right? In fact, that it's the opposite. It's abundant. And I think that grasping that is sort of the first thing. But then you have to ask the why question. So, Ben, I'll throw it to you. Why does that matter that the dollars are going up, that the supply is continuing to become more and more?
Well, yeah, I mean, and even how did that happen? Who's responsible? I think, I grew up getting these nice crisp $1 bills or $2 bills when my grandparents loved to give me $2 bills. And, they're actually signed. It's a mechanical signature. But clearly there's somebody that's responsible for deciding how many dollars are we going to print. And I remember watching Goonies as a kid. And I remember, that Goonies taught me that it's actually illegal to get your own machine and make your own dollar bills, right? So that is something that we kind of know a little bit about. Somebody at the government is making dollar bills, and I guess they just choose how many they're gonna make. And I think we were basically assuming that the government's got that under control and we can just trust them, and that's actually kind of key to Bitcoin's innovation and the white paper that Satoshi Nakamoto, the inventor of Bitcoin, wrote about. Is he had become convinced that we can't, or we shouldn't, just trust that the government has this all under control and that they know whether or not to make more dollars. Because if the government say, let's say we have 100 $1 bills that the government has made. Well, you and I then can trust that $1 bill is a scarce resource. We'll decide that you can buy a car with it because there's only 100 $1 bills in existence. But then if the government prints another 100 and they don't let us know, then all of a sudden everybody's saying, well, I can buy a car, and pretty soon you find out that there are more dollar bills out there. And so what you find out is that the dollar bill is actually, if they print another 100, your dollar is actually worth half as much because there's all this extra new supply and demand. And so what has happened is, I think that things kind of got out of control, and Jared was talking about these charts where they go from the left up to the right. If you just Google global monetary supply since the COVID pandemic, or even back to the financial crisis in 2008, we have just seen a huge spike in the numbers of dollars or the numbers of monetary units across the entire globe that central banks, the ones that we're supposed to be trusting to regulate all this, they've just kind of gone out of control.
Yeah, some context here. So you're right. The general trajectory of this chart, low bottom left, high bottom right, going parabolic. We can see that shape. But I can actually remember some numbers here. So in 2009 was the second church then I began serving as a pastor in West Michigan. It was shortly after there, you're right, global financial crisis in those sort of years. I can also think of the Tea Party movement. Do you remember that? The Tea Party movement. So a conservative movement to say, hey, we are spending too much. And if I'm have this at all correct, we were right at around 10 to 11 trillion dollars in deficit at that time. Okay, not a good number, but let me even put 10 to a trillion in context for our listeners. So get this. 1 million seconds happens for each of us around every 12 days. So 12 days from now, from here to 12 days out, 1 million seconds. 1 billion seconds is 31.7 years. I can think of that. My kids struggle to probably think of 31.7 years. They've not achieved it yet. Jared, you're there, I think, right? But how about 1 trillion seconds, guys? Do you know how many years then is 1 trillion seconds? You ready for this?
Like over 100, 200?
So a million, 12 days, 1 billion, 31.7 years, 1 trillion seconds is 31,709 years. All right. And that's boy, I mean, I still remember Austin Powers when he comes back, right? He's been out of the game for a while, and he's asking for $1 million, right? And they're like, a million's not anything anymore. You got to up that to 1 billion. 1 billion. We're throwing around billions right now like they're nothing. And as we do that, we're accumulating for ourselves these trillions. It's a truly boggling number, the size of which it is hard for any human to understand and comprehend. We as numbers get bigger, we struggle to have any analog to them in our daily life, including the trillion. So 2010-ish at a 10 to 11 trillion. And as we sit now, we're over 34 trillion. And we are adding 1 trillion to that deficit now, less than every 100 days. All right, as a nation. So we've got this issue. Even if money stayed the same, we were talking about producers earlier. They're more than happy to produce more. That's just part of serving our neighbor, living in kind of capitalistic society. You'll do that, but how do we run our business? Not to mention our personal checking accounts, right? How do we manage our own scarcity? When I love that reference to Goonies, Ben. $20 bill, Chester Copperpot, or was it $50 bill? I forget. But
$50 bill, $50 bill.
Yeah. When we can't do that, it's illegal for us to do it. I have no recourse to go into my checking account and float the decimal point out to the right and expand my balance 10x at any given time, much less 2x or 3x, right? I can't do that. Meanwhile, the very dollars that my savings, that my house, that my car, the checking account, the very dollar that this is denominated in, that's that denominator number, the number of dollars out there all the time is increasing, which means more dollars chasing the same number of goods. This is overly simplistic, and yet you won't find an economist who says this isn't true. Okay, so more dollars chasing the same number of goods, and the result for people like us is a dozen eggs in Southern California, $6.99, right? And that's down from last year when it was up close to 10. But nevertheless, it's still way up from 3, 4, 5 years ago. I'll also say this real quickly. We're probably not going to get into politics much, but this wild government spending is absolutely a bipartisan phenomenon, right? It happens on both sides of the aisle. In fact, as we talk about American life and politics becoming more and more contentious, more and more divided and heated and the like, one thing that we don't talk about much, but again, maybe overly simplistic, and yet it's right there at the core, at basement level, like water leaking into your basement, Jared, is the fact that whoever conceivably has the power in the executive office and runs Congress and the like, they hold the purse strings for their projects. And which dollars are they spending? Well, it's tax dollars collected from us, true. It's that, but it's also a lot of new dollars. And this is administration by administration by administration. So there's this politicization of our political life, and I think it's highly heated because of this. And now we're going to add one more word: false abundance of the US dollar.
Before we go to false abundance, I want to pull up a chart that I grabbed just to show our viewers and listeners what we're talking about. So here it is, the global money supply, and M2. If you Google global monetary supply, or M2, it shows how many dollars essentially the world has created over time. And notice down here it says that over 20% of USD, over 20% of the numbers of dollars that exist in circulation was created in 2020 alone. So there was this huge jump in 2020. So the amount of dollars are going up. That is what makes inflation go up, and that's why things cost more these days. That's what we're talking about. So, all right, I'll stop sharing, and we're back to David. Tell us about.
Can I add one more thing before we
Jared,
go on?
Go. Yeah.
So if you're not, if money isn't your thing, if you say I don't really care about money, like that's not helpful. Think about time. So when you work for a company, for an organization, you agree to a salary or an hourly wage, right? That this is how much I'm willing to be paid for my time, for my effort, for my energy, whatever. That I could be doing a million other things, but I'm going to agree to this. And that's fine. That's good. And that's good as long as your unit, the dollars you're using or your time that you're being paid for is going to be attributed fairly and isn't going to sort of be stolen away from you. And so another way to think about this is that as, the government makes more dollars, what they're actually doing is making your time worth less. Because you're not necessarily being compensated at that same rate that they are increasing the dollars. And so what does that mean? Well, then that means the time that you're spending, they're saying, is worth less. And so unless you can somehow keep up with that, your time is being literally almost stolen away from you and taken to do whatever they want with sort of the funds that they have. So I think a helpful other perspective as you think about, well, it's not just dollar supply. This actually is my life, my time is now somehow worth less because of something that I have no control over at all.
And this makes me, probably for myself, I run to anger pretty quickly when I find out that's true. But I often think of anger as an emotion I graduate to when I'm tired of the more base emotion, which is sadness in this case, sadness or fear. Sometimes we like graduating from both of those and just reaching for anger. So I'm sad about this for my life. I'm even more sad though, and I'm probably more happy to be sad or comfortable being sad, maybe is the way to put it, when I think of the people in my life, from my wife and my children's future, future spouses, future children of theirs, my neighbors and the like. So it's that sort of thing where I can sort of either maybe for myself shrug or become angry, but ultimately this is a sad thing, and it's not a necessary thing, and that there's a new concept as well. Why is it not necessary? Because it has to do with the lack of has to do with those in power and control abusing their power and control. Again, too deep for this conversation here, and it's something I'm only grasping at now, but there's a lot of economists say that they claim this. They rarely back it up very well, but they claim, Ben, you were talking about the M2 money supply, that an increase in money supply is good, and some of them say necessary. And then they pick an arbitrary number, 2%, which we're well over now. We could ask why that, but what we can certainly point to is how this is being abused. This is truly being abused at this time. And that abuse by those who are in quote unquote power, who are otherwise called there to serve, they can kind of get away with it. They can get away with it because the people before them got away with it. They can get away with it because they give us sort of short-term incentives. Hey, here's a stimulus check for $1,200, right, in the middle of COVID. I forget the actual number, but I've heard that for every $1,200 given to each taxpayer citizen, something like this, that the equivalent was something like $40,000 or $48,000 of actual stimulus money that went out. So I got a little stimulus money. I'm kind of satisfied or placated in the moment. You handed a kid a sugar pop, and he goes off in his corner and he's happy, and he looks away from all the other stuff that's going on. So that they've gotten away with it. With the citizenry, they've gotten away with it. We'll see how long that happens, because again, that debt is going up and up and up. And all of this is rooted, back to our initial language, is in a false abundance. A false abundance. I think we would know that. Somebody suggested if we were playing a game of Monopoly, maybe there's a fourth voice here, and there's 4 players. We're on 4 sides of the board, but one of us on one side of the board has access to money from a different bank that the others don't. That person will literally run the board, right? They will run the board, and the experience of the other players will be one of extreme frustration. They will get frustrated. They will give up. They will get angry. They will walk away. And that seems to be happening in an area of false abundance. One of the things I think then that we like about Bitcoin, and we would want to introduce to our hearers, whether they're familiar with it or not, is this idea, not just idea, this reality with Bitcoin of a fixed cap, a fixed market cap of money. And in this case, the number is, and I'll hand it over to one of you, but the number is 21 million. Why 21 million? We actually don't know. And that gets into some of the lore, the legend, the design even of Bitcoin, but 21 million, guys. So let's talk about this fixed supply.
Yeah, this is such a fun topic, I think, to talk about because of how rare it is and how unique it is. Like, one of the things that is core to what Bitcoin is the 21 million. And in some ways, I think it's kind of the easiest thing to grasp onto, right? So it's a number. There's 21 million of them. 21 million is maybe a number that we can grasp a little bit better than something like 34 trillion. But I think it's also helpful to start with, because, hey, I can say there is a million of these or a million of those. But if I say for now, 2024 to, I don't know, pick a year into the future, 3028, there's only going to be 21 million of these things. And that is written into the code that Bitcoin is, the software that it is, that no one can change that. That idea alone is intriguing enough for some people, and hopefully for you too, listeners, to just kind of go, imagine, what does a world look like? What does a thing look like that is, maybe it's a store of value, maybe it's part of a way we spend our money, but how does the world change when there's only 21 million of them and no more?
Yeah, and I think what's fascinating is, somebody might say, well, why can't they just change the software, right? And in some ways, they can. People have tried. A number of people have actually taken the Bitcoin code and they have said, we don't like the rules of Bitcoin. We don't like this 21 million and its imposed scarcity. So we're going to kind of make a copy of the Bitcoin code, and we're going to launch a new coin, or we're going to try to get all the rest of the people that are running the Bitcoin software, and we're going to try to get them on this new platform. The funny thing is that those people that have tried that, it hasn't worked out very well, because the 21 million is such a unique thing, and it's because of its imposed scarcity. So if a bunch of other people are still saying, no, we're going to stick to the original software design, and we're going to impose on ourselves and the system that we're using, that we're only going to have 21 million, and it'll take until 2140 to produce all those coins. But we've already produced 19 million, some of them already. And so there's a group of people that say, we're not going to change the code. We're going to keep it. We're going to run it as is. And more and more people are saying, I want a piece of that pie. And it's 21 million pieces, and then divisible up to 100 million units of what are called satoshis, right? So it's not just 21 million pieces. There's a lot of people in the world, right? Over 8 billion. And so to try to see if everybody could get a single piece, it's not like a stock where you have to buy one single stock. You could buy up to 100 millionth of a Bitcoin. And, but there are 21 million of those 100 millionths put together. That's all the Bitcoin that there ever will be, as long as we're running this software as it currently stands.
That's excellent.
That's what makes it so unique.
I was going to ask that 8 billion question. How does this work if there's only 21 million and there's 8 billion people? It's like the US dollar. In this case, like the dollar, it's divisible. But whereas the dollar is divisible to the 100th part, to the penny, to the cent, which we are comfortable with, but ultimately was a design decision at some day. The design of Bitcoin is that you can divide that out to the 100 millionth part, which is a wildly small fraction, admittedly. But here's the fun part. If I buy 10 Satoshis or 10,000 or 10 million Satoshis, they will never be diluted, right? So if we think of a fraction with the numerator on the top, denominator at the bottom, my 10 millions on the top, the divisor at the bottom is the 21 million. The proportion that I buy in any given moment cannot be diluted. Now, we could make a further division of Bitcoin, right? To instead of the 100 millionth, we could go out to the billionth part. But again, that just means that the Bitcoin I have can be broken up into smaller parts, but proportionally, it's still the same amount of the whole. So fixed supply, not to be diluted. And we can, I'm sure, talk about that probably in another episode. Why do we trust that code can't be changed? You mentioned that, Ben. Good answers to that. Stay tuned. Probably another time, I think, but won't be diluted. Then there's also this, and this goes all the way back to the beginning, our Beanie Baby conversation, right? That you began us on, Ben, is that this Bitcoin or any proportion of it is valued in any number of currencies, including the US dollar. In the euro, in the peso, on down the line, it's valued. But if the local value of that goes up, right? Remember that when the Beanie Babies were collectibles and the value went up, was it Mattel who was producing those? I'm trying to remember. But Mattel, let's say, what do? They got to be careful not to overly flood the market. But boy, if the value of those Beanie Babies goes up, they're going to produce more and more and more. The value of Bitcoin goes up. There is no central organization, no central person there who can go in and increase the supply to their benefit, right? It's understandable when Mattel does that when they're producing Beanie Babies. That is the individual economic decision of somebody who's actually producing something in the marketplace, who's actually serving their neighbor, even with a toy. It's maybe not the most profound way to serve a neighbor compared with like nurse, doctor, teacher, mom, dad, this type of thing. But nevertheless, they're serving their neighbor and their wants and their needs. And they will gladly, though, serve with more if they can. If it's advantageous for the neighbor and advantageous for them, that's understandable. The increase of supply of the money that is underneath this system. That's literally kind of that communication between you and me in terms of the value of our daily work. It's also that ability, as you said, Jared, to save it and protect it for a later time for my family and the people I care for. When that is inflated away, it's egregious. It is ugly. It is ugly. We're living in some of that ugliness now. Hopefully, some of our hearers are maybe more open to this conversation, just as we were just a few short years ago, because we're actually feeling the effects when the money that kind of stands between our work, our commerce, our future days, right? When that money is melting away because the supply is increasing, we can feel how terrible that is. Now consider an alternative monetary system, a cultural good that has been created, not run by any individual country, with a fixed monetary supply. And hopefully the imagination can begin to say, oh, this is something I want to learn more about.
Yeah, if listeners are interested in learning who's the thinker that basically undergirds this whole system of the global monetary supply needing to continue to grow, and that's supposedly a good thing, look up John Maynard Keynes, Keynes. Keynesian economics is basically what modern monetary economics, modern monetary theory is based on. Well, listeners, go and check it out yourself. What I'm really interested in, David, is talking about scarcity and abundance in regard to not just Bitcoin, because even Bitcoin is this finite human resource. It does a better job of representing our time and value than the current US dollar does, but much more important to all of us is the abundance of the gospel that comes through Jesus Christ.
Yeah. This was kind of the fun of this topic, scarcity and abundance, because we are physical creatures, and it is a struggle to be finite, right? There are things I would like to provide for my family that I can't, or my father who died 5 years ago. Oh, how I would love to have provided and still be providing to this day more days of life in this lifetime for him, and I couldn't. And that, of course, then is the insult of death itself, is that I couldn't do it. Or 2 years ago, my wife was struggling. We were struggling. She was going through breast cancer. It was terrible. Suddenly, death was lurking not only for a family member, but now my wife. I would gladly die for my wife and my children, and yet I couldn't die for her in her place, right? There was nothing I could do. The best I could do was to walk alongside of her, shoulder to shoulder. But boy, again, an insult, because that which I wanted to provide from her was too scarce for this guy, at least, and I couldn't do it. Rewind that, all the way back to the beginning, our first parents, Adam and Eve, and every one of us since. We don't like being finite, right? We don't like it at all. And so what do? We rebel. We rebel against God, who is the provider, and we want to place ourselves up in his place. Of course, Genesis 3, if you've heard of it, hopefully many of you have heard of it, read Genesis 1, 2, and 3. Quote unquote, it's often called the fall, right? But I've heard some theologians, and I really appreciate it, offer different language for it, refer to it as the rising up, where mankind rose up against God. How dare you be limitless and not me, right? How dare you be God and not me? So we want to always raise ourselves up in the place of God, as if in doing so, we can now overcome scarcity, right? And as if in doing so, we then could be the givers of abundance. And we can't. We simply can't. Maybe at best tempted to do that in that time. We're going to be the stealers of somebody else's scarcity, right? We're going to co-opt it as our own. And again, that comes back around to the conversation as we've had it so far. How else would you guys frame this kind of scarcity abundance problem for us spiritually?
I think I would jump to St. Augustine's "Our hearts are restless until they rest in you." So many people today, I think, struggle to find meaning, to find purpose. I mean, one of my main roles where I serve here is to visit homebound people. And I can't tell you the amount of time someone has told me, I can't do anything. I have no worth. I have no value. And so much of that, I think, comes from this desire to produce, to be abundant, self-sufficiently, if you will, and that ultimately, we all know that one day we're gonna be dust again, right? And that we can't produce forever. And so when we hear Jesus say, I have come to give life abundantly, that you may have that today, it's almost unbelievable in a way, because you look around the world and you don't really see a lot of real abundance, right? You look at the people that you might think have that, and a lot of times, well, it's just this or it's just that, and it's not that real abundance that I think a lot of us crave and desire for ourselves and for our children. So when I think about scarcity and abundance, I mean, Jesus gives to us what we could never find, what we could never earn. Even if we somehow were able to do all of those things that we wanted to, right? Even if you could have done those things, David, it still wouldn't
Right.
have been enough. It still would have fallen short.
So then I can jump forward. So this is the human condition since our first parents rebelled, since they rose up. And I suppose the irony is in rising up like that, we never rise so high as we think we do. And instead, then we actually find ourselves in the hole, having sort of fallen in. Help, I've fallen and I can't get up. I can't get out. This, again, is an insult to us. And so maybe we'll raise up ourselves, or maybe then when we know we're too weak for the task, we raise up others, right? We raise up others around us, things, others, and the like. And then coming forward through to this Easter season that we're in, Luke chapter 24, magnificent chapter. It'll teach you, among other things, how to read the Old Testament. So this is the Gospel of Luke, the third Gospel writer, Luke 24. It's the day of the resurrection, the morning of the resurrection. Jesus, I should say it this way, two disciples are leaving Jerusalem for another place. They are downcast, and a stranger comes up to them, this stranger to their eyes that are grieving and cannot see anything anymore, because everything they thought they saw has now crumbled and died. Their eyes do not perceive him and understand him. It's said even that they're kept from seeing him. But Jesus, nevertheless, it's the risen Christ, and he asks them, "Hey guys, why are you so glum?" And they say, and it's beautiful. They finally are sobered up by the lack of abundance. They have finally faced up to scarcity. And they said, "Are you the only one in all of Jerusalem who has not heard that this Jesus Christ, whom we had hoped, past tense, our hope is dashed. We thought there was abundance on the horizon. It has been dashed. He has been crucified and he has died." And then they're rebuked by this risen Savior. "Oh, you foolish one, slow of heart to believe. Did you not read all those things that were written about this one, that he must die and he must rise?" And so he has. And he walks with them further. And before this whole episode is out, their eyes are open to him. They see him. And what is it then that the disciples of Jesus Christ experience after that? They experience a Lord who has broken death itself, which goes to what you said, Jared, as my life is winding down. I don't know exactly where the end point is, but at 46 years of age, my life is decidedly winding down. I'm actively fighting this winding down, right? I'm not so young as you, Jared, right? And I'm certainly not so young as my children, ranging from like 13 to 20, who are just right into that prime and headed into that prime. Things are winding down, and I'm fighting that. But now the Lord has broken death physically. He actually rose. He comes to his disciples in peace, says, my peace is with you. He doesn't say, I forgive you and I'm out of here. He says, I forgive you and I'm with you to the very end of this age and into the age to come. Suddenly, abundance of a different stripe is added to our lives.
This has been a great episode, and we look forward to being with y'all again very soon. So until then, enjoy the great abundance of the gospel. And in the meantime, we'll continue to talk a little bit more about Bitcoin and how it relates. God bless.